Hey guys, tonight we dive deep into a paradox that might just rattle your soul. God breaks the man he wants to use. You probably won't survive this journey without feeling a little cracked or shattered yourself, because transformation rarely comes wrapped in comfort. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through life carrying pieces of yourself. Pride, ego, illusions of control. Each one a brick in your fortress. But here's the catch. God doesn't use whole bricks to build his masterpiece. He breaks them down, sometimes painfully, into raw material ready for reshaping. This breaking isn't random. It's purposeful. It's the divine paradox where destruction precedes destiny. Throughout history, countless figures you think of as invincible were first broken. Moses, leading an entire people to freedom, spent years as a fugitive shepherd in the wilderness. His identity shattered before his calling crystallized. This isn't coincidence. It's a pattern repeating across time. Historians still argue whether such personal trials were intended by divine design or merely human circumstance. But the outcomes speak volumes. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monks believe the soul's growth comes through cracks of light that only appear when we're broken. Think of it as the universe's way of forcing us to glow. Meanwhile, psychologists today affirm that trauma and hardship often precede profound personal transformation. Imagine God as a master potter shaping clay. The man who resists breaking remains rigid and unusable. The one who yields becomes malleable, ready for greatness. Tonight, you're stepping into this transformative fire. Brace yourself to be broken so you can be rebuilt, stronger, wiser, and more purpose-driven. You've probably heard stories about great leaders who seemed invincible until life knocked them down hard. Tonight, you meet these giants again, not in their moments of glory, but in their seasons of brokenness. The man God wants to use is often first shattered, his spirit tested and cracked before his strength is revealed. Take King David, for instance. Before he ruled Israel, he was a shepherd hiding from Saul's wrath, wrestling with doubts and fears. His journey wasn't a straight march to the throne, but a winding path through valleys of despair. This breaking molded his heart and prepared him for leadership. Historians still argue about the exact details of David's life, but his story remains a testament to strength born from weakness. Consider also the Apostle Paul, once a fierce persecutor of Christians, then broken and transformed into one of Christianity's most influential voices. His trials, imprisonments, and physical afflictions were part of the breaking process that shaped his mission. Fringe scholars debate whether his conversion was mystical or psychological, but all agree his brokenness fueled his impact. Here's a quirky fact. In some ancient cultures, warriors underwent ritualistic breaking ceremonies involving isolation and hardship to become leaders. The idea that breaking precedes leadership isn't just spiritual, it's cultural and historical. As you reflect, notice that brokenness isn't a sign of failure, but a forge for greatness. The man God wants to use doesn't avoid pain. He embraces it, knowing it refines character. You might feel broken now, but this season is your preparation. Remember the master potter from last section? The rough edges chipped away reveal the true shape hidden within. Your cracks aren't defects, they're designs. So, tonight, lean into your brokenness. It's the beginning of your transformation, from ordinary to divine instrument. Humility now. There's a word that feels like sandpaper on your ego, right? Tonight, you're invited to meet humility not as weakness, but as the fertile soil where divine transformation takes root. The man God wants to use must learn to bow, not out of defeat, but as an act of opening himself to change. Throughout history, humility has been the backbone of those chosen for great tasks. Think of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples, a radical act that flipped power dynamics on their head. This gesture wasn't just symbolic. It embodied a surrender that allowed God's work through him. Scholars still debate how literal this act was, or whether it served more as a teaching story, but the message is clear. Humility is key. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some martial arts traditions, beginners must kneel and bow repeatedly before training, reminding them that mastery starts with humility. The same principle applies spiritually. You might resist humility because it feels like loss, but in reality, it's gaining a new kind of strength. It dismantles pride, that sneaky fortress that blocks growth. When you admit you don't have all the answers, you create space for God's wisdom. Psychologists affirm that humility correlates with openness, empathy, and resilience, the very qualities that prepare you for divine use. It's like tuning your heart's antenna to receive higher signals. So as you trudge through your day, notice moments where pride whispers lies about self-sufficiency. Choose instead humility, a posture of learning and surrender. It's not about being less, it's about being ready. Remember those cracks of light? Humility widens them, letting divine light flood in. Tonight, lean into humility. It's the first step toward being broken and rebuilt for a purpose far greater than you imagine. Pain, nobody likes the word, but it's a universal sculptor shaping the man God wants to use. Tonight, you're invited to see suffering not as punishment, but as a divine tool chipping away your imperfections and forging resilience. It's raw, uncomfortable, and undeniably real, but also necessary. Consider Job from the Old Testament, a man who lost everything, yet never lost his faith. His story isn't just about tragedy. It's about refining character through relentless trials. Historians still argue whether Job was a real person or a poetic symbol, but his narrative stands as a powerful testament to endurance. On a quirkier note, some cultures believe in soul retrieval ceremonies where pain is thought to knock pieces of the soul loose, later to be gathered and healed. While Fringit highlights how many traditions recognize pain's role in spiritual wholeness, pain dismantles, pride shatters illusions, and forces humility. Remember how crucial that was. Last section. It strips away the masks you hide behind, exposing your true self to God's transformative hands. Modern science reveals that suffering can trigger post-traumatic growth where people find new meaning and strength after hardship. Your brain and spirit, it seems, can turn pain into power. Tonight, as you face your own pains, whether visible scars or silent wounds, know that they are part of the divine breaking process. They prepare you, deepen your empathy, and sharpen your purpose. The potter's hands are rough, but their touch shapes masterpieces. So embrace pain as the master's tool breaking you to remake you. You're no stranger to endings. They're messy, painful, and often terrifying. But tonight, you walk the path of inner death, where the man God wants to use must shed his old self to be reborn. This isn't physical death, but a spiritual dying, a letting go, that clears space for new life and purpose. The Apostle Paul speaks of dying daily to the old self, a concept that echoes through Christian mysticism. His letters reveal a man constantly wrestling with transformation, aware that only through surrender could he be used by God. Historians still debate the exact meaning of Paul's metaphorical death, but the process of inner renewal remains central. Quirky enough, some desert monks practiced ritualistic fasting and isolation, aiming to die to their worldly selves, emerging spiritually reborn. This extreme form of breaking highlights how shedding old identities is crucial. Spiritually inner death is the collapse of ego control and self-reliance. It's terrifying because it forces you to confront vulnerability and uncertainty, but it's also liberating. Only when the old self dies can the new self aligned with divine purpose rise. Psychology parallels this with the concept of ego death, often described in transformative experiences where rigid self-views dissolve, leading to profound insight and change. So tonight, as you reflect on what parts of yourself must die, remember that death in this context is not the end, but a sacred beginning. The potter doesn't just mold clay. He first softens it by breaking its hardness. Embrace the inner death. It's the gateway to being remade, ready to serve a higher calling. You've probably been waiting for your breakthrough, maybe even set your own schedule for when it should arrive. Tonight, you face the hard truth. God's timing isn't yours. The man God wants to use learns patience, understanding that breaking happens not on your calendar, but on divine time. King David's journey to the throne took years of wandering and waiting. He didn't rush his destiny. He trusted God's timing even in exile. Historians still debate the exact chronology of David's rise, but his patience amid trials is undeniable. Here's a quirky bit in some indigenous cultures. Rites of passage happen only when the community deems one ready, not the individual. This communal timing echoes the divine schedule, reminding you that readiness isn't always self-determined. Waiting feels passive, but it's an active season of growth. Like a seed buried in soil. Breaking happens underground, unseen, but essential. Science confirms that waiting and delayed gratification build resilience and emotional strength. Your brain literally rewires during these periods, preparing you for what's next. So tonight, release your grip on the clock. Trust the unseen hand guiding your breaking and remaking, even if it feels slow or painful. Remember the master potter's patient hands shaping the clay. Divine timing is the slow spin of the wheel, aligning you perfectly for purpose. Patience isn't just a virtue, it's the crucible for your transformation. You find yourself alone in the wilderness, physically, mentally, spiritually. It's cold, it's lonely, and it's exactly where God's breaking work begins. The wilderness experience is more than just a setting. It's a crucible that tests, purifies, and reshapes the man God wants to use. Think of Moses, who spent 40 years in the desert before leading his people. This wasn't just exile, it was preparation. Historians still debate whether this period was literal or allegorical, but the theme of wilderness as testing grounds is undeniable. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient shamans would spend days alone in caves or forests to undergo spiritual transformation, often facing visions or internal battles. The wilderness is both external and internal. In the wilderness, all distractions fall away. Pride, ego, and false securities fade as you confront your raw self. This isolation forces reliance on God, creating fertile ground for transformation. Science shows that solitude can increase neuroplasticity, enhancing your brain's capacity for change. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's a sacred pause that rewires your mind. Tonight, if you feel isolated or abandoned, know you're in the wilderness being broken so you can emerge stronger. Remember the potter's clay spinning alone on the wheel. The wilderness is your spinning moment, shaping you unseen. Embrace this lonely place. It's where the man God uses is born. Your pride is a fortress built high walls, thick with self-importance and ego. But the man God wants to use finds those walls crumbling because breaking pride is essential to becoming malleable in divine hands. Tonight, you confront the uncomfortable process of surrendering your ego. Think of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, who was humbled when God stripped him of power and sanity until he acknowledged divine sovereignty. Historians still argue about the literalness of his madness story, but its symbolism of broken pride stands strong. A quirky fact, some Native American tribes practiced vision quests, challenging young men to confront their ego and fears alone in the wilderness, a brutal but transformative ego break. Your ego whispers that you're self-sufficient, but breaking that illusion is necessary. Pride blinds you to God's shaping and keeps you stuck. Psychologists call this the false self, a persona, protecting vulnerability but blocking growth. Letting go of pride uncovers the authentic self, ready to be used. So, tonight, listen for the ego's voice and gently say, "Not my will but yours." Pride's fall is painful, but it opens the door for divine purpose. Remember the potter pressing clay, flattening bumps to shape beauty? Your ego is that bump prepared to be smoothed. Embrace broken pride. It's the gateway to being truly used. Tonight, you're walking the tightrope of faith, the invisible thread that holds you steady as you're broken and rebuilt. Trusting God during breaking is like standing on a bridge you can't see but know is there. The man God wants to use leans into this trust, even when the path is dark. Abraham's story is a prime example. Asked to sacrifice his son, he trusted God's plan despite uncertainty. Historians debate the literal versus symbolic nature of this story, but its lesson on faith amid breaking remains timeless. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval mystics spoke of dark night of the soul, a spiritual crisis where faith is tested and refined through doubt and despair. Trust doesn't mean absence of fear. It means moving forward despite it. Neuroscience shows faith activates brain regions linked to hope and resilience, helping you endure hardship. Tonight, when brokenness threatens to overwhelm, remember trust is your anchor. It's the quiet voice whispering, "I am with you." Remember the master potter gently shaping clay without rushing trust in his hands, even when you can't see the final form. Lean into faith tonight. It's the lifeline in your breaking. As the breaking continues, prayer and submission become your refuge and tool intimate acts that deepen your connection with God while dismantling resistance. The man God wants to use doesn't just endure breaking, he actively partners with God through these spiritual disciplines. Consider Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying fervently yet submitting to God's will. Historians still debate the emotional intensity of this moment, but its significance in surrender is unquestioned. Here's a quirky fact. Some monastic orders use repetitive prayer chants to cultivate submission, a practice called centering prayer. It's like a spiritual metronome, keeping your heart aligned with divine rhythm. Prayer isn't always asking. Sometimes it's listening. Submission isn't passive. It's active yielding. Both require humility and courage. Psychological studies link prayer to reduced stress and increased emotional regulation, showing that surrendering control isn't weakness but strength. Tonight, as you wrestle with your breaking, use prayer to speak honestly and submission to listen deeply. These acts soften the hardest parts, making you pliable for divine shaping. Remember the potter's hands, steady, patient, and precise. Your prayers and submission invite those hands to work freely. So lean into prayer and surrender. They're your allies in this transformative breaking. Breaking isn't a solo journey, it's lived out within the web of relationships that challenge and support you. Tonight, you discover how community plays a vital role in the man God wants to use. Whether through encouragement, accountability, or confrontation, others become instruments in your breaking. Think of the early church where believers shared burdens and sharpened each other. Paul's letters often addressed communal struggles, emphasizing mutual growth. Historians still debate the dynamics of early Christian communities, but the importance of community in spiritual formation is clear. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tribes use rites of passage ceremonies involving community challenges to break and build identity. It's a social breaking where you don't just grow alone. Your community may not always be gentle. It might confront your pride, call out sin, or push you beyond comfort. But this breaking is part of divine work, refining you through others. Psychologically, social support reduces stress and fosters resilience, making breaking less isolating. Tonight, consider who in your life reflects God's hand, friends, mentors, family, inviting you into transformation. Remember the potter's wheel spinning steadily, shaped not just by hands, but by the environment around it. Embrace community's role in your breaking. You're not alone. Tonight, you're sharpening your senses to recognize divine breaking, distinguishing it from ordinary hardship. The man God wants to use learns to discern when life's challenges are random struggles and when they're purposeful, dismantling for growth. Think of Joseph, whose betrayal and imprisonment weren't just misfortunes, but steps in God's plan. Scholars still debate the historical accuracy of his narrative, but it teaches keen spiritual perception. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some mystics claim divine breaking includes holy discontent, a restless dissatisfaction, prompting growth rather than despair. Learning to recognize. Breaking involves awareness of inner transformation. Are you growing in humility, patience, or faith despite pain, or stuck in bitterness and defeat? Psychology speaks of post-traumatic growth positive change after adversity, mirroring spiritual breaking's fruit. Tonight, reflect on your struggles. Are they random wounds or divine chiseling? This insight guides your response and trust. Remember the potter's steady hand, discerning where to shape next. Cultivate this spiritual discernment. It's your compass through breaking. Your brokenness is not your end, but the birthplace of strength. Tonight, you witness the alchemy where weakness transforms into power. The man God wants to use becomes mighty through his cracks and scars. Consider Paul's paradox. When I am weak, then I am strong. His afflictions didn't diminish him. They magnified God's strength working through him. Historians still debate Paul's thorn's nature, but its symbolic power is undeniable. Quirky, but profound. Some cultures revere shattered pottery, repairing it with gold. A Japanese art called kintsugi, symbolizing beauty in brokenness. Your broken pieces, like kintsugi gold, become marks of divine craftsmanship, making you unique and powerful. Neuroscience supports that overcoming adversity fosters resilience, empathy, and leadership qualities. Tonight, embrace your brokenness as the source of new strength. The man God uses is not flawless, but forged. Remember the potter's masterpiece, imperfect but perfect for purpose. So lean into brokenness. It's your power source. Living as a broken vessel means embracing imperfection as your divine identity. Tonight, you step into this truth. The man God wants to use acknowledges his flaws and offers himself fully cracked but complete. Think of the cracked jars used in ancient rituals. Though imperfect, they held holy oil or water. Their value wasn't in perfection, but purpose. Historians still debate how much symbolism these vessels held, but their spiritual resonance remains. Here's a quirky fact. Some cultures see cracked objects as lucky, believing the breaks invite blessings in. It's a reminder that flaws aren't failures, but openings. Psychologically, embracing imperfection reduces anxiety and fosters authenticity, aligning you with God's intended use. So tonight, shed the mask of flawless performance. Show up broken, humble, and willing. God's power flows best through vessels that admit their fragility. Remember the potter's wheel? The vessel's cracks don't disqualify it. They distinguish it. Live as a broken vessel. It's your true strength. You've traveled through breaking, surrender, and transformation, all leading to this, being used by God. The man God wants to use isn't perfect or self-made. He's broken, remade, and aligned with divine purpose. Tonight, you stand on the threshold of that calling. Consider Moses again, leading a nation not by his might, but by God's power working through his brokenness. Historians still debate his historical existence versus legend, yet his story endures as a blueprint for divine use. A quirky tidbit: some saints claim that feeling utterly broken is a sign you're ripe for God's greatest work, a spiritual green light disguised as despair. You might wonder, what does it truly mean to be used by God? It's surrendering control, walking in humility, and trusting that your brokenness is the canvas for divine masterpiece. Psychology echoes this. Those who find purpose beyond themselves report greater well-being and resilience, reflecting spiritual fulfillment. So tonight, embrace your journey's end as a beginning. Align your brokenness with purpose, ready to be God's instrument. Remember the master potter's hand, steady and skilled, crafting beauty from broken clay. Step into your divine use. The world awaits your light.